Hi everybody, this is Jane at Rockin' Worms, and welcome to my YouTube channel where I focus primarily on red wiggler, composting worms, and mealworms. Tonight's video is related to the red wigglers. Specifically, I'm going to give you my recipe on how I pre-compost bedding for my worm bins. So before we get started on the pre-composting recipe I'm going to share with you, let's peek into one of my grow out bins and see what's happening there. I gotta put my glasses on as always. Just a real quick peek. Here's some little worm hanging out right there. And you can see there's bunches of worms in here. I've been pulling out of this bin for the last couple weeks and taking out adult red wigglers. You can see maybe there's not a lot of worms in this bin because I've been taking out a lot of breeders. But anyways, here's some worms. Let me show you this over here. This is what our goal is going to be tonight to get to, which will take, maybe a month. But these little orange dots are the biota, the microbiology that we are going to be growing in our pre-composting bin. Okay. So that's the end result there. Let me put this back out of the way and we'll get started on the pre-composting. One of the first things you're going to need is a bin. This is an indoor tabletop pre-composting method. So you're going to want a bin that's going to fit comfortably in whatever space you're going to be doing this process in. In addition, there are a few supplies you're going to need. Nothing crazy, and most of it is free. So one of the big things is a whole lot of cardboard shred or paper shred. And I'm talking about in total, you're going to be using probably about 3/4 of a big black leaf bag, those 55-gallon type leaf bags full of shred. Additionally, you're going to be using, gotta check my little notes here, coffee grounds, a lot of coffee grounds, and some window screening, some cardboard, and some vegetable puree that is going to be your liquid ingredient in your composting bin. So I'll talk more of that as we go along. So the first thing I'm gonna do in my bin, which let me just show you, this is an 18-gallon bin. I actually picked this up free from the side of a road in my neighborhood. Somebody was throwing it out. I picked it up. It's a great little compost bin. So what I'm going to put in here is 10 gallons of shredded cardboard mostly. I do have some, paper in there from junk mail and stuff. And when I say 10 gallons, I'm using my handy dandy gallon measuring. And I, stuffed it in there. So that's 10 gallons. Now the next item we're going to put in is coffee grounds. And that's going to be the nitrogen to our, this is heavy, to our carbon base here. This is 3 pounds, but it's really heavy, or 3 gallons, excuse me. It's more like 5 to 6 pounds because it's a little wet, okay? I get my coffee grounds from Starbucks when I'm running my errands. I actually basically go by 2 Starbucks, and I always stop in and see if they have the free coffee grounds. When you get them, they'll either be in a bag like this, or they'll be in the big plastic garbage bag that they empty their grounds in as they use them. You just have to ask. It's part of a program they're doing as far as giving back to the community. So don't feel weird about going in and asking. I don't even drink coffee. I've never even bought a coffee there, and they're happy to give me their grounds. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to add to our kind of lasagna mixture, little layers, is the vegetable component. And this is going to add liquid and also jumpstart the biota process. So I just want to give you an example of some of the things that you can use to make your vegetable liquid. We call it slop here, but vegetable liquid sounds a little bit nicer, doesn't it? Okay, I have in here some onions from the back of my fridge. I use a lot of onion peels. You know, when you do your onions, you got all those peels. They make great vegetable juice. An old skanky potato that kind of got lost. Some rotten tomatoes. I use a lot of hot peppers because my other animals, chickens and cows, don't eat hot peppers. So if I have extra, this is a good use for them. And I got some bananas, a little papaya. But this is the star of the group here. These are oranges. These are citrus. And you can see they've gone really moldy. And the mold is actually what we want. If you have moldy food, lettuce or anything else, this is a great use for it. Stick it in your blender and start pureeing it up. So when you put it in your blender and you puree it, you kind of need to add a liquid, right? Water is fine, but we can keep the powerhouse going of adding biota and food for the biota, which then of course turns into food for the worms, by adding stuff like this to your blender when you make the mix. This is potato water, pasta water, the leftover juices from opening cans of vegetables. Basically anything that you would go to the sink to pour down, pour it into a jug instead and save that for your liquid when you're pureeing your vegetables to make your compost. So the next part, let me just move this out of the way here for a minute. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add the vegetable liquid. Looks really appetizing, doesn't it? Ugh. It's brown in there because I actually added some banana peels and they turned brown into liquid. I also added some juice from some cans of beans, black beans, brown beans, or black beans, red beans, things like that. So now that we added the juice, we're going to start moving this around to mix the juice in and start coating that cardboard shred or paper shred with the liquid and with the coffee. Because what we're doing is we're making that cardboard in particular very appealing to the microbiology, which will start breaking it down over time. And that microbiology is what your worms can directly eat, as well as the microbiology helping to break down the kitchen scraps, the food scraps that you put in your worm bin. Your worms can only eat very small pieces, right? They're small animals. They have very tiny mouths, and they can only put in a tiny amount of food at one time. So if you add in, a carrot, that's great. But that's like, adding in a skyscraper, serving a skyscraper for dinner to a human. So what you need to do is you need to break it down into small pieces, and the biota does that for you. Okay, I am just mixing this up. One of the things I forgot to mention when we're talking about selecting your bin size is you want to be able to comfortably reach down to the bottom of the bin in order to turn and mix your materials. If you get a big bin and you can only reach down halfway, you're not going to be able to turn the stuff at the bottom very easily, are you? And you're definitely going to need to do that. Okay. Now, let's see. It does take 5-10 minutes. I'm doing this as fast as I can so you get the idea of what's going on. The other thing you want to think about when you're selecting your bin, do try, however, to go as deep as you can, because an outdoor compost bin minimum size is considered to be 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. And obviously we're not anywhere near that size in the compost bin here on the table, but the more volume we can get into it, the more the forces of decomposition are going to work in our favor, which means there's more mass, there's more biota, and they're going to multiply and be fat and happy and sassy and break down more and more of the cardboard and the coffee grounds and turn it into free worm food. And who can argue with that? Okay. Oh, I got a little pocket over here. So let me just mix that in. Okay. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect because guess what? We're going to add another layer. We want to get this bin, you know, pretty full. Not tippy-top full because we do need to be able to work it, but we want to, again, get that mass working in our favor. So now I'm going to add the next layer, which is going to be 5 gallons of shred. There it is. Spread that out a little bit. And this is about 1.25 gallons, gallon and a third of coffee grounds. Okay, get that out of our way. I'm just going to mix this in just a little bit here on top, just to get these materials mixing and mingling. Okay, just a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is take another gallon of my vegetable liquid and pour it on the top. I don't know how much I'm going to end up needing, and I would love to tell you exactly what it is, but I don't know. So let's start with 1/2 gallon, because what we're doing here again is putting in enough liquid to facilitate the bacteria and other biota growing. We want to dampen the cardboard or the paper and get it soft and mushy so the biota itself has an easier time breaking it down. Now what we're going to do in a second here, let me get this by me. It's a little harder to get by me. There we go. Okay. I already know it needs more liquid, but what we're going to do is a little liquid test. We're just going to grab a handful, see if we can hear it. Can you hear that? That means at least there's liquid in there. And now we're going to squeeze really hard and see if we get any liquid out. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Any liquid out? No. So it can take a little bit more liquid. But we've already got a good amount of moisture in here. See how it's clumping and holding together, but falling apart? This would be great if it was worm bedding in itself. But what we want is this a little bit wetter, because our worms are not going directly into this, remember? This is pre-composting the bedding. This has a process to go through before we can add it to our worm bins. One of the reasons it has to go through this process is the decomposing of the organic material releases heat. And that heat, we're hoping, will exceed 130 degrees, which means it is killing weed seeds if it was your outside compost. It is going into a secondary phase of bacterial development that's called thermophilic. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But even if the heat released here gets to 105, 113, 114 degrees, which is what I routinely get in these bins, it's too hot for your worms. Your worms are not very happy anything over a maximum of 95 degrees. And you really want to keep them more in the, 75, 80 degree temperature. So putting your worms into this kind of system right now, they'd be fine for, 12 hours. And then this material is going to heat up and it will cook your worms, which would be a bad thing. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Okay, we've got a decent amount of volume here. I'm going to leave it here for right now because in a week or so, I'm going to actually add more carbon, more nitrogen, and more vegetables to reactivate the breakdown system once this kind of plateaus and starts to cool down. I'm going to want to add all these materials again in a smaller amount, but add it all again to rejuice the system and reinvigorate the growth of the bacteria, which will again further break down this material and make it ready for the worms. Okay, so let's finish up this first step in the process. And we're going to do that by closing off the access to this material and why it works. Now, why do we want to close off the access? Well, we don't want it to smell to us, and we don't want it to potentially smell to any bugs going by. So we're going to put stuff on top of it to make sure that that doesn't happen. The first thing we're going to put on top of it is some fine mesh window screen. I've used this several times. It's starting to rip in the center, so I'm going to have to replace this soon. But it's fine for now. It'll serve the purpose. And its purpose is to keep bugs out because it's hard for them to get through that screen mesh. And also to hold more shred. This is 6 gallons of cardboard shred. And the raw amount of the cardboard shred, 6 gallons, 5 gallons, 4 gallons, isn't important. What is important is that it is a deep layer, like, at least 3 inches of layer on top of your screening. And this cardboard will again further keep the composting process inside the bin and any type of pests outside the bin. That's really what its process is. Its function is, excuse me. And in a belt and suspenders kind of way, we're going to add one more thing to help keep the heat that is being generated, again, inside the bin, because that bacteria likes the heat, and we want this bin to get as hot as possible. So we want to keep the heat in, and we're going to do that by adding just a piece of cardboard. I've used this several times already. So it kind of has a shape, and you just put it down and it's done. So the next step is to check this in about 24 hours, 18 hours, somewhere in there. Check the temperature. I just use my kitchen thermometer and probe, stick it in there, and see what the temperature is. And what we're shooting for, what we're hoping for, is to see an increase in temperature of the bin contents in excess of the ambient room temperature. What exactly that increase will be depends on your specific mix of carbon and nitrogen and how quickly that biota starts breaking things down. What I'm planning on doing is doing a short update video in the next day or two to let you see where this compost is going and how it's progressing. And that's really just it for tonight. So I hope you give this a try. Perhaps you can try starting in the next day or two, and we can have a compost along jamboree and we can see how it goes, okay? So that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next couple of days. Yours in the dirt. Have a good one.